And so that's me. The reason that I feel it's important to talk about the tester's role in Agile planning is because of some problems people have. So you think? I can imagine the speakers doing selfies all the time with a little stick. With a little stick. Okay, so there's problems. People are doing Agile development today, and there's problems related to testing. There are problems related to testing. One of the #1 problems that I see in Agile development is the problem of siloing. The problem of siloing. And in siloing, what happens is testing activities get delayed till the very end of the sprint, because the programmers are working, and then there's only 3 days left and we have all the testing to do. Right? That's siloing. So that's a problem. It's a real problem. It's not artificial, and it's not necessarily your fault. But the techniques we're talking about in this talk help you minimize siloing. I don't say eliminate, but minimize siloing. So that's one problem. The other problem is when people are finished their sprint, they're not really done. So in Scrum, we're supposed to be done, not just done. We're supposed to be done, not just done, we're supposed to be done, not just done, we're supposed to be done, not just done. We're supposed to be done. There's 14, 15 dones that we're supposed to be done, because at the end of a sprint, we're supposed to be able to ship the software without any additional software engineering work. So one of the problems we see is that we're not really done. It's sort of fake. We're doing fake Scrum, not really done. And then the third one, and this one, I think there's no excuse for this, but it happens. We end up getting shallow testing. Very, very shallow testing. You know, I'm sorry, we only have a 2-week sprint, so we'll only do shallow testing. I don't know why people do that, but I believe it's very important to be deliberate in our testing. And if we're going to do shallow testing, do it on purpose because it's the right thing to do. Don't just do it because we've run out of time. Some things we need deep testing. Some things shallow testing is good enough. Something in the middle might work. Deliberately choose the depth of testing. Sometimes that just doesn't happen, so they just sort of touch the object and they say, okay, we tested it. Okay, we tested it. All right, we tested it. Well, maybe you did test it. I am from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. This is a French region in Canada. Has anyone ever been to Montreal? Well, come to Montreal, come visit. It's a wonderful place. And we have beautiful maple syrup, if you want to know. That's very, very reasonably priced maple syrup. It's true, it's very good. Okay, so come to Canada, tourist board. In Montreal, Canada, we have a long history of the Catholic religion in society. So if you want to see the evolution of Catholic Church in North America, that's a place to study the history. It's very interesting history. The schools were always separated. There was a boys' school, and there was a girls' school. And I don't know if this happens in Malaysia here. Are there boys' schools and girls' schools? So there you go. So it's very similar to the Catholic school system in Quebec. Now this stopped in about the mid-1970s, so I only saw the beginning. I only saw a little bit of it. But we had a tradition at high schools anyhow, because the schools were separate. We still had dances. This is a cultural thing, a dance. So you can imagine there's a boys' school and a girls' school, and they have a dance, a social thing, dance. And at the dance, this is an important Agile concept I'm talking about. Don't laugh too much here. So at the dance, we would have all of the boys on one side of the room, and you have a wall. All the boys are on one side of the room, and then way on the other side of the room, you have all of the girls on this side of the room. And so all the girls are there, and all the boys are there, and there's not much dancing going on. Maybe after an hour, 1 or 2 very brave people dance a little bit, but the high school, the Catholic high school dance, was all the girls on one side and all the guys on the other side, and not very much dancing. This is what I see today at Agile planning meetings. Okay? The metaphor is powerful and it's true. We see Agile planning meetings, and I audit and see tons and tons of these meetings. My sample space is large. I watch the meeting and we see on one wall, there's all the programmers. On the other wall, there's all the people with testing skills. And all the programmers are there, and all the testers are there. And they don't talk to each other. And once in a while, they do a little dancing. But not much. Because what happens is the programmers there, and they're usually very cool Java programmers, you know, fast Java programmers, and they program like the wind. And they're saying, hey, Fred, how long is it going to take to test this? And then Fred said, oh, that's about 3 days. Okay, thank you. And that's the role of testing in Agile planning. Well, Catholic high school dance in Quebec, at least we have maple syrup, right? So I'm saying now, there's a problem with testers' participation in Agile planning. And I am not joking about this dance thing. I see so many Agile planning meetings. First of all, sometimes people with testing skills are not invited. Sometimes they don't want to be invited because they're not involved. And there's certainly, if they are invited, they're not engaged. Not invited, not engaged. This is a serious concern. Serious concern. Now, what ends up happening in these meetings, the testers get bored. Oh, it's boring. What a waste of time. The programmers dominate the discussion. The discussion is programmers talking to programmers about what are we going to program. And quality discussions just simply don't take place. So these are problems we have. Testers attend Scrum meetings, bored to tears. That's a picture of a tester at a Scrum meeting. Testers don't engage in discussions. Planning is driven by technical debates by programmers. I'm telling you, these are problems. I want to solve these problems. There's ways to solve these problems. We see testing ideas are limited. They're silly. They're limited. They're narrow, shallow testing ideas. They're not rich, complex, interesting testing ideas. They're very boring testing ideas. In fact, in some companies, they make a little checklist, they make a template, and that's all they do. So, of course, you don't want to do any planning because it's obvious what you have to do to test, right? This is repetitive and experience-bound. And when I say experience-bound, I mean you only really test what you know how to test. You don't test what you don't know how to test, which is probably what you should learn how to test, because that's what the problem area is. So we have some serious problems here. And testers ask the questions, why should I do things? Why should I check? Why should I think? Why should I bother? Well, I tell you what.
You have to understand the cause and context of these failures. And they fall basically into three categories. There's preventable, those can be unwanted, but are usually due to deviations in high volume routine work. If you find these, aim is to rapidly identify future problems and stop the process if necessary.
Let me draw the pictures, and you get the programmers to explain to you what they want to do technically, and you draw the picture using a style called a block diagram, and anyone who's testing can be taught how to draw a block diagram. It's very simple. There's two elements. There's blocks that represent process elements, and there's lines that represent relationships between them, and it tells you what the programmers are going to change, what they want to do, how it relates to their work, and you are the only one who draws the picture. And if you draw it wrong, it's because you didn't understand it. And so you draw it wrong, they correct you, you learn. And so that's part of it. So first of all, actively participate. Be the one who draws. Be the one who understands. Really understand what they're talking about. Secondly, make sure your team chooses between alternatives. Do not just let the programmers come up with the first idea they think of and say, okay, we're going to program this. Instead, insist that for every requirement, for every Agile story, there are alternatives. I would say at least 3. But choose a few, a couple. And then the team should discuss, as a team, the benefit and consequence of doing and not doing the different alternatives. We learned this from Sesame Street, if you're familiar with the American TV show. It's for children, but they have a song. One of these things is not like the other. And they have another song that says 3 of these things belong together. And that's called an affinity analysis. And people who are 3 years old can learn how to do an affinity analysis. And that's what I want you to do in the Agile planning meeting. I want you to look at what's good, what's bad, what's different, what's the same. And you know what drives the decision of what plan we take, which choice we take? Usually technical risk. And who understands technical risk the best? People with testing experience. We choose the best programming solution based on understanding technical risk. not based on programming skills. That's active participation in design. So people with testing skills can help teams design software really well without even knowing any programming at all in the whole world. Just steal the markers. Steal every marker. Steal every marker. We have to worry about things like thoughtless planning. I see Agile teams have in their planning this notion that says, okay, we have one activity, test the story. If that's what your activity is, you're the only person who can do it. I challenge you to break down your testing into tasks and don't use the word test as a verb in describing those tasks. Say really what you're doing. What do you want to learn? What are the conditions you want to change? What are the things you want to explore? What are the things you want to learn? State them explicitly so that other people in the team can do the work, not just you. People with appropriate skills. I'm not saying that anybody can do it. You ever see the movie Ratatouille? Ratatouille, so this is about agile planning. If you look at Ratatouille, it's a movie by Disney about a rat that becomes a master chef. And they say in the movie, they say that anybody can cook. Well, it's true, I guess. Anybody can test, maybe. But what does it mean to say anybody can test? It means great testing can come from anywhere. It doesn't mean everybody is a great tester. And that's what the movie Ratatouille talks about, and that's true in an Agile team. Just because you have this experience of testing doesn't mean you have to do all the testing activities, all the testing tasks. Anybody with suitable skills in the team can. And a lot of testing tasks, believe it or not, have technical skills that programmers are really, really good at doing. So by doing this, we can minimize, I'm not saying avoid, but minimize siloing. I'll show you how that's done too today. We have to be careful about templates. We have to be careful about document-centric methods of doing these things, so we have to be cautious about that. Every story is different, and I want you to think of testing activities based on the real technical work that's going to happen. Now, all of you know about requirement tracing, right? Take everything you've learned about requirement tracing and throw it in the garbage, okay? Think of something else. Think of basing your testing on multiple dimensions. Some of them are requirements, so we want to test based on the story. Some of them are based on the real technical work the team is doing. The only way you can really identify them is to know what the technical work is. So participating in that. So every story is going to have different types of testing activities. We have some teams that have inertia from the waterfall approach. There's nothing wrong with that. Waterfall is a very good method of developing software. In fact, in my experience, the absolute fastest way to develop software is the waterfall method. So if someone says to you they want to be faster, tell them we should do waterfall. Only don't change the requirements. Thank you. I thought you were wondering what I was going to go to with that. Don't change the requirements. But we have people who think of the way they used to do testing, like they would say, okay, we have a test analysis activity, and a test planning activity, and a test, all these different things. And that's an artifact of a method. That's an artifact of a software development lifecycle model. Those aren't things that are really testing things. They're how testing fits into an SDLC. So you have a different SDLC, you've got to look at where does testing fit in. It's going to fit in differently. We're not going to use the same type of documents or the same type of analysis or the same type of test scripts. A lot of different things. So we have to throw out a little bit of the inertia from waterfall. A little inertia. And if you're interested in waterfalls, again, come to Canada. We have a cool waterfall in Niagara, Ontario. You can go there, you can get married, it's all really wonderful. I've seen people who take silly approaches that are tool-centric. So in other words, you make your testing activities to support the tool, not the tool to support the activities. If that's true, you might want to say, let's take that and say, hey, we don't need that type of thinking. We just used to do it that way because we had a waterfall model that used this tool. Maybe we don't need to listen to HP Quality Center records and stuff like that. I'm not going to pick on any one tool, just HP. The whole company. I love HP. They talked to me one day for 6 hours about requirements for Agile extensions to their tool, And everything they talked about with me, they did not do. I feel so good. All right, so this is basically, be careful. Don't let tools take thinking away. Agile planning. We do in Agile teams, okay? More test planning with less test plans. In fact, many Agile teams do not have traditional test plans because we plan testing activities and programming activities together. Awesome. Big happy family. We do a lot of test planning. For every requirement, we do test planning. Every single requirement. But we don't waste our time creating massive test plan documentation. We collaborate with the rest of the team and we make a list of all the work. We plan all the work, not just testing separate from Dublin. It's all together. It's interesting. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. Of course, some teams do need test plans as evidence. That's a deliverable at the end. If you have regulated environments, be careful, you have to do that. But traditionally in Agile projects, we're actually looking at planning, testing, and programming activities together, not separately. So it's not a separate thing, it's not a separate, we're combining development and testing. It's very important for people with testing skills. I say that all the time, testing skills, because in Agile teams, if you follow dogma, there are no testers in Agile teams. That's Agile dogma. So there's people with testing skills, but they're not testers. They're just people who are very specialized with good testing skills. But they're not testers. We don't want to get in trouble. We're going to get beaten up. But I say people with testing skills should actively participate working with the product owner in defining done. So if you have a done checklist, make sure you actively participate in it and make sure it includes all business risks, technical risks, corporate risks, organizational risks, stuff that matters. So you have skills in this area, you can help. A lot of programmers try to make these done checklists. They're beautiful lists, but they're almost always naive from a point of view of quality-related issues. I'm not saying always, but frequently, very frequently. So it's important in done, as I said, business, technical risks. If we have no definition of done, we're going to have inconsistency, we're going to have bug escapes, we're not going to have solid velocities, we're going to have a lot of weakness. So I think the beginning is actively work with the product owner to define a very good definition of done, get consistent at delivering it, and have the whole team buy into it. So that's the done thing. Weak examples of done is the developer says it's ready, the stakeholder says it's ready, the calendar says it's ready. That's traditional software testing problems. It's better to have a real explicit set of criteria when we talk about done. If you're interested in examples of done checklists, send me an email. I'll send you a link to some beautiful, beautiful examples. I've got actually many, many gigabytes of examples of these things. Many gigabytes. It was 69 gigabytes last time I checked. Examples and case studies from real Agile projects. Sanitized to protect the innocent. You've got to look at beautiful done check. Functional testing. These are very important testing activities, and we can identify them if we're actively discussing the development. What are they going to change? What's the real technical work? And this is a fantastic way to find problems. It's not everything related to just the story. It's other parts of the system that share the code. There's lots of stuff we can do that's customer facing. There's non-functional testing, that's experiments usually, where we study attributes of the system, and we try to decide if they're acceptable or not, and make code changes if they're not, try to fix that. That's non-functional experiments. There's tons of them that might fit in your sprint. Don't forget static analysis, that's part of it too. Then there's robustness. A lot of Agile teams forget that we're supposed to have code that's robust. It doesn't just work, but it's robust. I want to ship it, it's got to be robust. And so we can do stuff like stress testing. I set up environments for teams that on every build they do at least one stress test. That's a special type of thing, because now you never have a build that's not passed a robustness test. So you don't risk sending something that functions but breaks quickly in the field. All sorts of robustness testing. Exploratory testing, it's very important in the Agile planning meeting to identify charters for exploratory testing. What are the missions that you're going to be exploring during the sprint? I like to make sure several people in the team have skills to do that type of testing. It's concurrent design and execution of tests as you're learning. It fits very, very nicely into Agile sprints. Maybe not all the testing, but it's very relevant, especially for things that are not covered by your automated regression testing, for example, or technical risks like I described based on the real technical work that's going on in the sprint. There's all sorts of exploratory charters you can put in there. And of course, we cannot forget tasks related to regression testing. In Agile teams, regression testing is a way of life. It's not just another phase. It's something we have to do as part of our continuous integration. So we should remember to put activities related to automating the new unit tests and putting it into our unit test regression strategy, automating our new story tests and putting it into our story test regression strategy, and using tools and methods that facilitate that. Like today we see a lot of people using fitness and cucumber type of tools instead of QTP type of tools to do the type of automation, because the maintenance cost is dramatically lower and it fits into the integration frameworks nicely. So you choose the tools that facilitate the regression. And then there's testing activities that are done usually by programmers. For example, whenever someone is adding a feature, maybe we should try to make sure it's testable. You ever hear of testability? Testability is an interesting concept. Testability is a relationship. It's a relationship for between the person testing it and between the code. And it has to do with not just the technical things, but the skills of the people. And by putting hooks in for testability, we're doing things like having verbose log files, which can track all sorts of non-functional information, like timing and synchronization stuff, data management stuff, that can be logged. Developers can put hooks in to do verbose logging. Developers can put hooks in so that we can control the application through an API to do what they call headless test automation, not through a GUI, but through an API. Developers can put hooks in to observe any system or state variable. What does that sound like? Controlling and observing, controlling and observing. These are testing activities done by programmers to make it easier to test, to make it easier to script, to make it easier to batch thousands of things, to really facilitate testing. So those are testing activities, but traditionally done by programmers. Stuff related to business rules. If you have a strong business domain, you want to put in testing activities related to business rules. Business analysis stuff, maybe activities relating to sharing information, if you have to, integration with other teams, documentation that we have to prepare for compliance to corporate governance, for regulatory compliance, activities related to learning. Sometimes we actually have to do research or experimentation in the sprint, so we have activities related to learning, and that's the basics of this. I think Agile testers are a part of the Agile team, active part of the Agile team. It's not a separate process. They're part of the team. They should be flexible. That means they should be able to divide up their work into the individual things and help make trade-offs as to say what's relevant or not, based on real technical work, which is where you get a risk analysis, the traditional development. At the same time, we should be graceful. Agility is about grace. It's not about just flipping and cutting everything in 3 weeks. And graceful things happen when you do good elicitation of story tests. And you can split stories gracefully based on acceptance.